Let me kick things off with a quote from the OpenAI website. ChatGPT Work, a new agent in ChatGPT that helps teams turn ambitious goals into finished work. And with ChatGPT Work comes the GPT 5.6 Frontier model family. But what really got me curious while working with this AI agent was the fact that the platform gives us three different model options, with Luna, Terra, and Sol, plus a whole range of reasoning settings. And that's exactly what I wanted to figure out. So, together with my salesman buddy here, I came up with three different tasks and put selected Sol and Terra configurations through their paces. I deliberately left Luna out because OpenAI positions it more toward lighter, clearly defined, and high-volume tasks. And at the end, we'll take a quick look at the model selection itself and have a short chat about when to use regular ChatGPT and when ChatGPT Work makes more sense. Because games make everything more fun, we're sending our salesman buddy straight into a 1980s arcade so he can go wild on Neon Rift. The whole thing started with a pretty long prompt, but here's the short version. Create a visually interesting and fully playable 3D WebGL game called Neon Rift as one single HTML file that runs directly in a browser without external libraries or additional files. The player flies a hovercraft through an endless tunnel, basically a kind of spaceflight simulator. You can see all 5 results at once, currently showing the game's start screen and its overall visual style. Terra Light is in the top left, Sol Light in the top center, Sol Medium in the top right, Sol High in the bottom left, and Sol Extra High in the bottom center. Before we get into how the games actually turned out, one thing jumps out right away. Terra Light needed just under 3 minutes, while Sol Light took almost 4. Sol Medium was already up to nearly 14 minutes. Sol High finally crossed the finish line after roughly 48 minutes, while Sol Extra High took a whopping 74 minutes. Same job, exact same prompt. So the big question is all that extra processing time really worth it? Or would a lower reasoning level be enough for this kind of task? There's not much to criticize about Terra Light, apart from the tiny detail that it failed. What we get is basically a black screen where pressing the spacebar pauses the game. Another highlight is the option to switch the sound on and off. And that little blop sound you hear is obviously Oscar-worthy stuff. For this entire performance, Terra Light takes home the Golden Blueberry Award in the category I really wanted to. I just had no clue how. From my point of view, Sol Light had the most interesting start screen. The actual game works pretty much as requested, although it's still got a few rough edges here and there. With Sol Medium, you can tell the AI stepped up its game a little. The hovercraft looks more polished, and for the first time, there's also an engine sound that dynamically changes with the actual speed. Sol High adds an extra vibe through the visualization of its propulsion system, and the whole thing has a pretty good flow because the game gradually gets more challenging as the difficulty level increases. Despite spending another 26 minutes on the task, Sol Extra High doesn't deliver any major improvement over Sol High. So if I had to pick the configuration that delivered the best bang for the buck, I'd go with Sol High. Okay, enough gaming on company time. It's time for our salesman buddy to get back to his actual job, selling old CNC machines with robot arms bolted onto them afterwards. And hell yeah, our guy's definitely in the mood for that. The starting point for this task was a prompt asking for an intentionally chaotic, overloaded and amateur-looking technical PowerPoint slide that breaks pretty much every rule of professional presentation design. You can see the result right here. And yes, I can confirm that slides like this aren't just fiction because I work in this field. Armed with this overloaded slide, the challenge once again went over to ChatGPT Work. The original prompt went like this. Redesign this rough slide completely from scratch. Preserve all information, establish a clear visual hierarchy, and create a high-quality, fully editable 16:9 PowerPoint slide with no overlapping or clipped content. Render the result and independently review the completed slide for accuracy and visual quality. So basically, the job was to untangle this entire mess and turn it into something clean, readable, and properly presented without losing the relevant content. Once again, the processing times were all over the place. Terra Light needed just under 6 minutes. Interestingly, Sol Light was even faster at 5 minutes and 20 seconds. Sol Medium took almost 8 minutes, while Sol High really went the extra mile and spent nearly 22 minutes on the task, even longer than Sol Extra High, which finished in just under 18 minutes. The clear winner here is Sol Extra High, because this reasoning level decided to clean up and recreate the machine image first before arranging everything else in a clear and readable way. But once you dig into the tiny details, none of the results is truly usable as is, because individual diagram elements were either ignored or changed. Just take a closer look at the flowchart and all those arrows on the chaotic original slide. Weirdly enough, Sol High was also the only configuration that thought it might be a good idea to include the 5 clearly visible detail images. Another thing the models seem to struggle with is understanding how text is supposed to fit inside a defined area instead of casually spilling right outside the box. And that's exactly where you can clearly see the difference it makes when a real person who actually understands this kind of work takes care of the job. Now that our salesman buddy has explained the general benefits of his CNC machine, it's time to take a closer look at the automation interface. For that, he shows us the software tool and the control unit. This one also needed a bit of prep work, although I'm pretty sure companies everywhere have piles of lists just like this lying around. The first task was, create a CSV file containing 225 production records with deliberately built-in data problems. This pretty massive and only loosely structured file became the shared starting point for every configuration. The next prompt asked ChatGPT Work to turn it into a professional and interactive production dashboard. First, it had to inspect and clean the data, document any errors or unusual values, and finally test all metrics, filters, charts, and calculations for accuracy and functionality. Long story short, build an app with a bunch of drop-down controls that lets us check how productive the machines actually are. Terra Light spent almost 5 minutes on the job, only to miss the target again, just like it did with the arcade game. Interestingly, the AI actually builds the dashboard in a bright design, while all the other versions use a dark background. Unfortunately, the very visible message dataset loading error cannot read properties of undefined doesn't exactly inspire confidence. Okay, you can select a date, but that's pretty much it. Sol Light takes around 6 minutes and 30 seconds, but strangely enough, this configuration fails when creating the actual HTML version. What looks pretty decent and works surprisingly well inside the chat ends up half-baked and basically useless in the real file. Sol Medium does a much better job, although the processing time already jumps to a pretty hefty 24 minutes. The smaller issues include the less than ideal layout of the input fields, missing color references, and some rather creative color changes between the chat preview and the final HTML version. Sol High takes the same kind of creative freedom and spends almost 30 minutes crunching away. Overall, though, there's a noticeable extra layer of polish here. The grouped blue headline numbers and the orange divider line, for example, create a much clearer separation between the different interface sections. Sol Extra High stays busy for almost 46 minutes and delivers the best-looking result by far. At the top, we've got the drop-down controls, followed by clearly separated interface sections, proper labels, and the matching color references. The longer processing time suggests that Sol Extra High probably ran into some of the same early hurdles as the other configurations, but after spending more time on the task and going through several rounds of iteration, the result kept getting better. So, here's my takeaway. Looking at these results, you can't help but wonder, what are the simpler models even for? Do I really want to save a few tokens or a bit of processing time if all I get back is something half-baked? I think a visual comparison sums it up pretty nicely. Just ask yourself one simple question. Which of these cars would you actually take on a road trip? Yeah, I've definitely made up my mind. Now, as promised, let's take a quick little detour and compare regular ChatGPT with ChatGPT Work. If you've watched my videos before, you already know that pretty much everything I do revolves around ChatGPT. Idea in, prompt out. That's basically the short version. But why would I even need ChatGPT Work when regular ChatGPT already seems to handle things just fine? Let me break down the difference in a few simple words. Regular ChatGPT is basically one continuous back and forth conversation. It's all about ideas, concepts, text, prompts, and working through things step by step in a dialogue. After each answer, the LLM pretty much sits there waiting for your next input, and responses in this kind of conversation are usually pretty fast. When we look at the web app, you'll see the option to switch between chat and work right at the top in the middle. Make sure chat is selected, then head over to the right side of the prompt bar, open the drop-down menu, and choose the latest model, GPT 5.6 Sol. If you're also on a Plus account, you'll currently see medium and high in my setup at the time of this recording. ChatGPT Work, on the other hand, doesn't just answer questions. It's built to work with files, create applications, and handle complex tasks largely on its own. Once you give it a job, ChatGPT Work figures out which steps are needed and, depending on the task, pulls in the right tools, skills, plugins, files, or connected sources. That whole process can get pretty involved and take a lot longer. We're staying inside the web app, but this time, select Work at the top in the middle. You'll notice that the interface changes a little. You can reference a project, connect plugins, and choose your model over on the right. Unlike regular chat, Work gives us 5 suggested performance levels, or presets. Technically, these aren't 5 different models or 5 pure reasoning efforts. They're ready-made combinations of a model and its reasoning effort, starting with Terra Light, followed by Sol Light, Sol Medium, Sol High, and finally, Sol Extra High. Terra Light sits on the faster end, while Sol Extra High sits on the smarter end. The default setting is Sol Medium. If you're the kind of person who loves tweaking every little setting, hit the Advanced button, and there's plenty more to play around with. You can choose between the 3 models, Sol, Terra, and Luna. Select the reasoning efforts available for each model. And yep, there's even a max setting. And adjust the speed. Multiple specialized subagents aren't automatically used at the regular performance levels, though. You've got to specifically ask for them. Only Ultra, which is currently limited to certain accounts, can automatically hand suitable parts of a task over to subagents. Your available usage depends on your plan, so it's worth checking whether the selected level actually makes sense for the job. Higher reasoning efforts usually mean longer processing times and more token usage. Max will therefore typically burn through more of your allowance than Light. And if you accidentally picked the wrong setup and just want to get back to the default, simply hit Reset. Another cool thing about ChatGPT Work is the little panel on the right side of the browser. There, you'll find Outputs and Sources. Outputs gives you a quick overview of all the files and work results created throughout the chat, so you don't have to scroll through the entire conversation just to find one specific result. Sources lists the files, websites, and connected sources used for the task. That can include sources you provided yourself, as well as anything ChatGPT Work researched or pulled in along the way. And finally, a quick word about the 3 models. OpenAI basically puts it like this. Choose Sol for ambiguous, difficult, or high-value tasks that need extra analysis, judgment, or polish. Choose Terra, the pragmatic all-rounder, for everyday work that needs strong reasoning. Choose Luna for specific, high-volume tasks. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for listening. Your channel, AI. Now you know.